Okay, so here are two examples. You might just want to go ahead and pause the video and write each of these problems down because it'll take you a moment. That's why I wrote them in advance. But once you've got them written down, and yes, you should have these problems in their entirety, then we'll go ahead and get started. So it says, given sine of theta equals 1/2 and cosine of theta equals square root of 3/2. So these are your givens. This is what you have to work with. And then they tell you to find the value of the 4 remaining trig functions. So in order to do this problem, you have to know what they're talking about. The 4 remaining trig functions are cosecant, secant, tangent, and cotangent. And we're going to use our identities to do this. So technically, you could draw a triangle, okay? You could sketch out a triangle. I'm going to do that up here. This is the cheat way of doing it, but we want to practice our identities. And you could put theta somewhere in your triangle and say, okay, well, sine's 1/2. Well, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so I know my opposite's 1. My hypotenuse is 2. And then cosine of theta is square root of 3/2. That's adjacent over hypotenuse. So my adjacent side is square root of 3. And then just go from there like we did 2 lessons ago. However, we don't want to cheat. We want to use the identities. So let's try to do that. So we know that sine of theta is 1/2. So we can also write, let's go ahead and write out that identity. That means that 1/2 is equal to 1/cosecant of theta. Then we can solve this equation for cosecant theta. If you don't remember how to do it, since the cosecant theta is in the denominator, that's acting as our variable. So we're basically going to solve this like we would have 1/2 equals 1/x. Oh, you can't see. Hopefully, you can just recognize that, oh, the numerators are the same, so the denominators are the same, so my variable equals 2. If that logic doesn't make sense to you, though, you could also cross multiply because it's a proportion. But I'm going to assume you guys recognize since the numerators are the same, the denominators are as well. So that means cosecant theta equals 2. Let's do the same thing with secant. So over here, you can see our identity for cosine is 1/secant theta. So I'm going to write out that identity. Cosine of theta equals 1/secant theta. Plug in what I know for cosine. That's the square root of 3/2 equals 1/secant theta. Now this one, notice the numerators are not the same. So we're going to have to cross multiply. So what that means is you do 1 times 2, and that goes on one side of the equal sign, and then square root of 3 times secant theta. Remember the whole time, this is acting as your variable. If you need to, if it helps you, just highlight that like it's your variable all the way through the problem till you get that highlighted portion by itself. So now that I've highlighted it, we can clearly see we need to divide by the square root of 3. And so secant of theta equals 2 over the square root of 3. Now we need to rationalize, so we're going to multiply by the square root of 3 on top and bottom. And we're going to get 2 square roots of 3/2. I'm running a little low on room here. Another way that you can think about it without using the identity, I just thought of a third way, is just flip these over. Okay? But I'm trying to teach you how the identity applies. So there's a visual way you can do it. There's a intellectual way you can do it with just thinking, oh, these are reciprocals. I'm just going to flip this one over. You can see that here. Sine 1/2, flip it over, cosecant's 2. Alright, but whenever you get to the tangent, I also want to use the identity. Tangent of theta is sine theta over cosine theta. So we're just going to plug these guys in. So tangent of theta equals 1/2 over the square root of 3 over 2. We've got a complex fraction. That means we need to do 1/2 times 2 over the square root of 3. Stay switch switch. The 2's cancel, and for tangent we get 1 over the square root of 3. Hopefully little blinking lights are going off in your head. We can't have a radical in the bottom. We need to rationalize. And make sure if the process of rationalizing doesn't make sense to you that you ask me about it in class, because that's something that's going to pop up time and time again when we're working with trig functions. So tangent of theta equals the square root of 3 over 3. And just to make it easy, because I'm out of room for my last one, cotangent of theta, I know that's a reciprocal of tangent. So I'm just going to go right here, flip this over before we rationalize, and we get square root of 3 over 1, which is just square root of 3. And there I've gotten all 4 of the remaining trig functions. Now what I want you guys to do is use the identities, use your knowledge of triangles and reciprocals to check your answer on the second example. So do the work from the identities, like I showed you, but use your knowledge of triangles and the definition of a reciprocal to make sure your answers make sense. Okay? And bring any questions you have to class tomorrow. Good luck!